It's different everywhere. There are differences in every country, even the US. That spectrum is hard to fit into. Larry Mullen Jr. avoided fame. The Edge enthralled with echoing guitar lines, and Adam Clayton moved steadily behind every melody while Bono won crowds at the microphone. Larry lingered. Sitting behind the drum kit, he kept time quietly and accurately. U2 would be different without that heartbeat. In 1976, a drummer posted a sign on a school bulletin board asking for musicians to create a band. Fans have always called him Larry. A legend was formed in a modest Dublin kitchen, something no one could have foreseen. No one expected the quietest member to lead one of the century's finest bands. Larry never wanted popularity, made controversial statements, or produced a solo album. He never topped the music. To him, art requires physical and spiritual sacrifice. After 3 operations, a childhood of loss, self-doubt, and an existential crisis that forced him off the stage, he's focused on drumming. Sometimes like a sigh, sometimes like the final voice amid chaos. What shaped Larry Mullen Jr.? A quiet drummer whose legacy lasted over 50 years? A man who never sought recognition yet echoed an era? That adventure began where and through what? Follow the rhythm to grasp a man, a legend who needed no introduction. Early life. Larry Mullen Jr. was born in Artine, a working-class North Dublin suburb, on October 31, 1961. Larry, the second child in a middle-class Catholic family, was raised in the 1960s Irish way, tough, regimented, and no tolerance for sensitive kids. His father, Lawrence Mullen Sr., was a calm, principled, distant Department of Defense employee. Larry's mother, Bonham Mullen, was kinder and more affectionate, the only one who made him feel heard. But the warmth faded. She died abruptly from a brain tumor in 1976. Young Larry was 14. The death of his mother was irreparable. Because she was gone and her absence isolated him, Larry grew farther from his father. While other youngsters entered puberty with joy and friends, Larry went inside, living in a lonely realm where unfathomable grief slowly morphed into rhythm. He marched in the Artane Boys Band, which taught kids military music. But Larry was rejected swiftly. It was brutally simple. He was left-handed. That was inappropriate in a perfect uniformity atmosphere. Lucky for him, his emotionally reticent father quietly supported him. Larry learned drumming at home using an old equipment he bought. No teachings, no structure, just instinct and tenacity. From that self-taught seclusion, a drumming style emerged. Simple but strong, full with emotion. Perhaps Larry was keeping time for things words could never explain. Larry grew up lonely, rejected, and unappreciated. However, those things taught him the most crucial truth. Silence doesn't imply weakness. Sometimes you have to build your own rhythm and stick to it to survive. Early work. If Larry Mullen Jr.'s life were music, that September morning in 1976 would be Destiny's opening drumbeat. A little note emerged on the Mount Temple Comprehensive School hallway bulletin board. Musicians wanted a band. Reach Larry Mullen Jr. No fanfare, no guarantees. That simple paper brought 4 strangers together and started U2. Slim Boy David Evans with a custom guitar responded first. Next came Paul Hewson, better known as Bono, extroverted, impetuous, and thought he was born to do great things. Next was Adam Clayton, a curly-haired romantic and the only progressive rock expert. When Larry was rejected from the Artane Boys, his father purchased him an old drum kit, and they huddled in his kitchen. First rehearsal wasn't good. Indeed, it was dreadful. Everyone played their way. Blending was unknown. No one left, strangely. Both felt something. Not expertise, but drive. A desire to be heard. They started as feedback. All knew just sound-related word. After the hype, they chose U2, a short, distinctive name with symbolic openness, albeit none of them knew what it meant. Larry was the disciplinarian early on. He was timely, serious, and drummed like a soldier. Larry was so irritated when Bono arrived late to rehearsal that he booted him out. Nobody was surprised. Music wasn't Larry's game. Only there did he feel in control and alive. Larry stood out for more than his personality. It also involved artistic remoteness. Larry maintained structure and rhythm as Bono, and the Edge experimented with electronic textures and sophisticated harmonies. He once said, "I'm the one who keeps it from falling apart." There were times when even Larry questioned his place in the band. He didn't write songs. He wasn't enamored with new sounds. He wasn't excited by the rapid changes the others embraced. But he never left. Maybe he understood. If everyone wants to lead, who will keep the beat? Larry's drumming style gradually became irreplaceable. Songs like I Will Follow, Gloria, and especially Sunday Bloody Sunday. His drum patterns didn't just set tempo, they made a statement. No flash, no overcomplication, just clean, precise, and powerful. Larry didn't play drums to be heard. He played to be felt. The early years of U2 were anything but smooth, rejected by record labels, dismissed as directionless and too raw, more shouting than singing. But through all the doubt, Larry kept playing. Each beat a quiet declaration: we're not polished, but we're real. They played in empty churches, tiny venues, obscure tours few remember. But it was in those forgotten places that Larry built what would become U2's strongest foundation, structure. When everything else was chaos, he was the one who laid the first brick. And so, from that kitchen in Dublin to their debut album, Boy, 1980, Larry Mullen Jr. wasn't the one who set the band on fire, but he was the one who kept it from burning out. Career success. When U2 released Boy in 1980, they were still just a young, ambitious Irish band not yet taken seriously. Their next album, October, was still rough around the edges. But by the time War came out in 1983, everything began to shift, and at the center was something impossible to ignore: the battle cry of Larry Mullen Jr. drums. The song Sunday Bloody Sunday opens with a snare drum, sharp, cold, evoking the image of marching troops. This wasn't a spontaneous beat. It was the sound of someone who had lost his mother in silence, who had known loneliness without anyone noticing, now transforming that quiet rage into the rhythm of resistance. From then on, Larry's drumming style carried its own unmistakable identity. He didn't rely on flashy fills or rock-style solos. Instead, he built a sonic space where every beat served one purpose: to support the emotion and structure of the song, never to steal the spotlight. With the Joshua Tree, 1987, U2 reached a new peak. But few noticed that behind the edge's ethereal magic and Bono's spiritual fire was Larry, holding it all together with crisp, steady beats in tracks like With or Without You and Bullet the Blue Sky. He didn't say much, but each strike on the drum was its own quiet declaration. I'm here, and I'm the foundation. As U2 entered the 1990s, they began to experiment. Albums like Octong Baby, 1991, and Zeropa, 1993, embraced electronic textures, complex harmonies, and futuristic production. For Larry, a traditionalist at heart, it was disorienting. He once admitted, "I didn't know if I still fit into that new sound, but I learned to let go and to find a different place." That place was in subtle evolution. Larry adjusted his playing, softened his volume, used electronic drums, simplified where needed, but always made sure each beat carried his unique fingerprint. As the band transformed, didn't resist. He adapted to preserve U2's soul. Beyond U2, Larry also took on a few outside projects. In 1990, he collaborated with other artists to produce Put Them Under Pressure, the official anthem for Ireland's national football team. In 1996, he and Adam Clayton reimagined the Mission Impossible theme, creating an electronic cinematic remix that charted globally. Yet amid all the fame, Larry held on to his silence. He didn't speak in the press, didn't join Bono's political campaigns, rarely shared much on stage. He sat behind the drum kit, watching everything from a distance like a silent gatekeeper, and everything he left behind was the heartbeat. For over 40 years, Larry played on every U2 recording, every tour, until 2023. He wasn't the one writing the hits, but he was the one who made them stand, last, and become iconic. He didn't drum to showcase his personality, but to create emotional architecture. When U2 succeeded, the world called Bono's name. But Larry, he was the reason that success could happen again and again for nearly half a century. Personal life: though a member of one of the greatest bands in the world, Larry Mullen Jr. has always kept his life separate, almost detached from the spotlight. No scandals, no public justifications, no wedding photos on magazine covers. To Larry, the most precious things, love, family, pain, have always been kept in silence. He met Ann Atchison back in high school, before U2 even existed. A quiet love, never flashy, rarely mentioned, but for over 40 years and has remained, quietly, like Larry himself. They never officially married, but together they have 3 children and a home the press has never been allowed to touch. Despite his privacy, Larry is a devoted father. When one of his children was diagnosed with dyslexia, he didn't leave it for his partner to handle. Instead, it became the spark for a new creative direction, the documentary Left Behind. 2024, a film about children misunderstood within the education system. Few know that Larry himself once struggled with undiagnosed learning issues. In a recent interview, he shared, "Suspect I have dyscalculia, a difficulty with numbers, and for a drummer, that feels like a curse." It wasn't a complaint. It was a rare confession that even after decades of performing, he was still battling his own body. And not just mentally. Larry's body too has started to speak up after nearly half a century of keeping time for millions. In 1995, he underwent back surgery. In 2009, he had knee surgery. And in 2023, after years of enduring pain, Larry was forced into neck surgery, a complex procedure that marked the first time he missed a U2 tour. To many, it seemed like just a temporary pause. But for Larry, it felt like an existential crisis. In a rare interview, he said something that left many stunned. "I no longer enjoy being famous, and drumming now feels like physical torture." He didn't step away because of conflict, nor because he'd lost passion. He stepped away because his body was breaking, his mind exhausted, and he no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. It was a quiet unraveling. No farewell, no press conference, no official statement. Just a man who once kept the rhythm for an entire generation, quietly stepping back to hear himself breathe. Larry Mullen Jr. was never the kind of artist who collapsed with fanfare. He didn't fall apart in front of an audience. He simply faded, like a drumbeat slowing down, then falling silent. But behind that silence is an entire life. Full of pain, full of responsibility, and full of love captured in every moment he once gave on stage. Legacy and influence. Larry Mullen Jr. doesn't like to talk about legacy. To him, it always sounds like a farewell. But whether he admits it or not, for nearly half a century, Larry has been the silent heartbeat of one of the greatest rock bands in history and a drummer who changed the way people understand the role of rhythm in modern music. When people think of great drummers, they often think of speed, technical prowess, or explosive solos. Larry had none of that. He didn't play a lot, but he played right. He didn't need to stand out because it was the intentional space he created between notes, the silence he carved that made listeners pay attention. It's a drumming philosophy that Rolling Stone alluded to when listing him among the 100 greatest drummers of all time, placing him at number 96, a modest ranking, but an accurate one. Because Larry never fought to be on top, he simply chose the right place to stand and stood firm. With U2, he has won 22 Grammy Awards, hundreds of international honors, and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2005. But perhaps what Larry takes the most pride in isn't the trophies. It's his ability to keep things from falling apart. In a band full of strong personalities, with Bono always charging forward, The Edge always exploring, and Adam Clayton quiet but deep, Larry was the axis that held them together. He didn't make decisions, didn't act as artistic director, but everyone knew. When Larry shook his head, no one dared to move forward. Those within the industry have often referred to him as the moral compass of U2, the one who reminded the band why they started, the only person who could silence Bono in a meeting, and the one who always asked, "Is this the right thing to do?" To younger generations of drummers, Larry represents a different kind of role model, not chasing complexity, not needing a spotlight, but understanding that music cannot exist without a solid foundation beneath it. His style directly influenced many alternative and post-punk drummers who prioritized minimalism, steady timing, and the ability to give space for other instruments to shine. But Larry's greatest legacy may not lie in his technique. It lies in a philosophy. Stay silent long enough, and when you speak, it better mean something. With every beat, Larry didn't just keep time, he kept emotion, and in an era of noise that might be the most important statement of all. Present life. At the end of 2022, just as U2 fans around the world were eagerly awaiting the band's groundbreaking U2 UV Live at Sphere residency in Las Vegas, a short announcement stunned the community. Larry Mullen Jr. would not be joining. For the first time in nearly 50 years, the band would take the stage without its drummer. The official reason was that Larry required neck surgery after years of accumulated pain. But behind that was a deeper fatigue, not just physical, but a growing spiritual disconnection from U2's journey itself. In a rare interview with the Washington Post, Larry was candid. "I need to take a break. I want to live my own life, not always be the guy in the band." It wasn't a farewell, but it also wasn't a promise to return. It was a man in his 60s, reflecting on a body worn down by thousands of nights on stage and deciding, it's time to step back. In 2023, while the other three members, Bono, The Edge, and Adam Clayton, launched their spectacular tour at the audiovisual marvel that is Sphere Las Vegas, Larry stayed home. He didn't object. He wasn't angry. He simply no longer wanted to be there. Instead, he quietly devoted time to his family, to healing, and, for the first time in years, to a personal project, the documentary Left Behind. The film explores the stories of children with dyslexia and navigating the modern education system, inspired directly by his son and by Larry's own wounded childhood. No stage lights, no applause. Left Behind revealed a different side of Larry. The father, the storyteller, the man who never forgot what it felt like to be left behind. And U2? Every member has confirmed Larry hasn't left the band. but no one knows when or if he'll return. In every press kit, every public statement, U2 continues to list him as an official member. Because to them, Larry isn't replaceable. He's part of the framework, integral and irremovable. And Larry himself has never said goodbye. He simply chose in silence, as he always has. As of 2025, Larry Mullen Jr. lives apart from the stage, the media, and even the band that defined his name. But no one dares call it a retreat. For Larry, this isn't the end. It's a new chapter, one where he no longer keeps time for others, but learns to listen to the rhythm of his own heart. Larry Mullen Jr. was never the one standing center stage. He often stepped back to a corner where his drums echoed like a whisper, not a declaration. And yet, it is that very silence that made him irreplaceable. For over 4 decades, he didn't just shape the sound of U2. He redefined the role of drums in modern rock, not as a showy weapon, but as a vessel for emotional depth. He didn't play to dazzle the audience. He played to keep the song true to its soul. His life wasn't without turmoil, a childhood marked by loss, years of physical injury, a quiet but enduring relationship, and existential crises that unfolded far from the spotlight. But Larry never used tragedy as a way to build his image. He chose to live and to play with honesty, restraint, and devotion. When he stepped away from the 2023 tour, many feared it was the end. But it wasn't. It was simply a needed pause, the rest note in the life of someone who had kept time for too long, now learning to listen inward. Larry's absence didn't erase U2's sound, but it made us all understand its worth. Because sometimes what touches the heart in music isn't what's played, but what's left out at the right moment. And that is Larry Mullen Jr., an artist who never asked to be remembered, but will always be mentioned every time a drumbeat begins, quietly, steadily, and unmistakably. If you've ever fallen silent at the cold, commanding opening of Sunday Bloody Sunday, if you've ever been moved by the quiet space inside with or without you, then perhaps you've already felt the soul of Larry Mullen Jr. without even realizing. Let us know in the comments. What moment made you realize Larry's drumming was unlike anyone else's? And if you believe silent artists like Larry deserve to be honored, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss the next story. We'll be back with more people who never stood in the center, but still made the world stop and listen.